500 Days of Summer was my very favourite movie throughout my teenage years, and it wasn't even close. 500 Days of Summer was the one, the only, my love cinematically, and I totally still understand why. I still love everything that I loved about it at the time. I love how funny this movie is. I love the soundtrack, which is honestly a thing that usually slips my mind and I forget to pay attention to with most movies. But with this, I'm like, hell yeah. I love how the film looks, how it flows, and I love that the film is full of smart adult dialogue. These are characters who are intelligent, snarky people who observe and point things out. They make each other laugh. They make the audience laugh. The dialogue throughout feels natural. I believe these people, even in the highly stylized world depicted within the film. And that's another thing that I do still love as well. Among the film's superficial beauty in its shots and color scheme, another thing that should be mentioned is that this can be a very cartoony movie. It's a bit over the top at times in the best of ways. The movie revels in the cliches, like having a main character who is a greeting card writer turned architect, and the film cleverly weaves between these in a story that is so clearly meant to deconstruct everything that the film itself is. It's set up like a typical rom-com as the protagonists argue about the existence of love, one coming from an optimistic viewpoint, the other pessimistic. And these are all things that rom-coms set us up for. The unlikely couple who are just so clearly meant to be. But 500 Days of Summer understands these ideas and this genre so well that it's not only able to build these things up from the ground up in an organic and genuinely likable way, but it's also able to switch it up in our faces and do things that most movies with the same exterior never would. It's for reasons like these that 500 Days of Summer proves to be something so very different from what we're all used to. And in between its hilarious moments and in between the cute and quirky couple shit and in between all the other details comes an honest depiction of a real relationship. And today I want to dissect it. I've been wanting to make this video for the longest time. Like, the movie has such a strong legacy in my mind just because I loved it so intensely for so long. So yeah, I've just always wanted to talk about it, and here we are. Hopefully I do an okay job. So the premise behind 500 Days of Summer is that it is about those 500 days in which this woman named Summer affects the main character in Tom's life. The titular 500 days spans across the entirety of him knowing her, the entirety of her affecting him. It's not just the days in which they are actually together, it is before and after, as the film acknowledges that those are still days of summer to Tom. From his initial infatuation to his heartbroken period, the 500 days are a vital element to the film's overarching point. I also admire that the movie delivers what it promises in its title. It's not just some bullshit cutesy sounding thing that doesn't really have anything to do with anything. The promise is in the title, and something as simple as that can sometimes be, you know, a point to appreciate. And what ends up making this such a fresh take and a fantastic representation of these 500 days is that the film is told out of chronological order. This is often used to emphasize comparisons between moments and cleverly fills in the details in a very intentional order throughout. This transforms a film from what would have been a typical will they or won't they type slog into an elevated character study about the idea of love, a theme in which the characters oppose in different ways, and that is key. We are introduced to the main character in Tom as being a hopeless romantic. A voiceover narrator tells us that he depends on finding the love of his life, that growing up he believed that he wouldn't be happy until the day he does this, with an offhanded excuse of blaming pop music and romantic films for feeling how he does, that Tom later ends up still blaming to this day.
It's these cards, and the movies and the pop songs, they're to blame for our lives and the heartache.
In a more modern take, one might think that Tom might blame Instagram or something for portraying a perfect life in his face, but regardless, it's a vicious oversimplification of the issues Tom has regarding his perfect vision of what love should be. We are introduced to the character of Summer as somebody who doesn't believe in true love, or at least doesn't believe in one destined partner who we are born to belong to. With a mention of her parents' divorce, it's clear that Summer has a negative viewpoint of relationships, more of a realist than Tom, who on the other hand not only strongly believes in love but desperately longs for it. Tom has a simplistic view of relationships and love, while Summer is more of a progressive, with a modern take on independency. In comparison there, Tom relies on codependency. He basically faces things superficially and decides on fate in a whim. We see this as from the very moment he learns that a girl that he finds pretty likes a band that he likes as well, it's sealed for him. That's the one. In his mind, that was a big moment. That was a sign of all the things that he'd ever wanted and waited for. But to Summer though, it's just a mere coincidence. Some guy has a mutual interest, that is all. And here, the audience is caught in the middle as the film is still setting things up. With the knowledge that we have in that we know that they're going to get together later in the film, we know that we like these characters in some way, and we know that these sorts of things in these sorts of movies are usually supposed to be paid off in some nice way. And so from that point of view, when you're watching it for the first time, it comes off as like this cute thing, and it does feel like a big deal since we're seeing it from Tom's point of view. But really, if you look back objectively, he's looking far too much into just a mutual interest. The film plays with our own expectations from the moment it starts. We are seeing this all from Tom's perspective. This isn't a simple 50-50 split variation between perspectives. Tom is our protagonist through and through. This is a part of the problem when he begins to show signs of an unhealthy romantic partner. We see this when from very early on in their relationship, before they even know each other very well at all, he becomes jealous and overthinks things so quickly. Like, for instance, there's this one part very early on where they're headed into work, and at this point they're general acquaintances, like nothing more than that, though he has a big crush on her. He asks how her weekend was, just casually, and she says it was good, emphasis on the good. And from that, he's convinced she's having sex with someone and takes it personally against him. From here on, things start to get a bit muddy. Soon after what I've just discussed comes the scene in the bar where they talk about whether they believe in love. And this here is a pivotal moment for all that follows, as at one point in the conversation, Summer says, "I don't feel comfortable being somebody's girlfriend." She likes being on her own. Relationships are messy, she said. Feelings are always getting hurt, and who needs that? And she finishes her point off with, "Let's leave the serious stuff for later." Anyway, from here I want to get out of this thing that I'm doing where I'm talking about what happens in the film in order and more talk about the relationship as a whole. So here are my thoughts, summing it up. Throughout the film, Tom and Summer spend time together in a number of ways, including going to see movies together, sitting in a park and hanging out, yelling penis out in public as a joke, and more general hangout type stuff like this, which for the purposes of this video, I will consider to be friend interaction. This here is where the divide will be drawn, in which I argue that among this interaction, they also have many moments of romantic interaction. They kiss in the copy room at work, they lie in bed together discussing their dreams and getting to know each other well, and just generally they do couple stuff. Summer does announce early on that she isn't looking for anything serious. She wants to just be friends, which it's a little contradictory to her actions if you ask me throughout the film, but at this point in time when she says it, I do believe it's true, but I think that every undeniable romantic moment between Tom and Summer throughout clearly represent the feelings that they have for each other. They have sex, yes, but it goes beyond just sex. They were dating, straight up. Friends my balls, as Tom puts it.
Kissing in the copy room, holding hands in IKEA, shower sex? Come on, friends my balls.
But despite this, Tom is majorly to blame for the things that happened. He fell too hard, too fast. He didn't listen to her. And I also think that he puts a massive amount of pressure onto Summer into being in a relationship to begin with at all. This is probably what put her off to begin with too. The fact that he idealizes love so heavily, and on top of that he unrealistically idealizes her. He's got kind of a perfect version of love in his head, and a perfect image of who he and Summer are to each other. But it's not cute. It's not in a romantic way. If anything, this point is in a childish way, as if the world revolves around him and only him. This is emphasized by him getting advice from his younger sister throughout the film. 500 Days of Summer knows its characters are flawed, and here it's where it constantly points a joke at that. But yes, ultimately they did agree to be friends. They both did. But her actions throughout the film begin to say otherwise. We see this when Summer brings her wall down, as the film puts it, letting him into her life unlike others. She tells him things about herself that she's never told anyone else before. She connects with him in ways that go beyond just friendly. And here I do think that she leads him on to call it back also suddenly later in the film, where she repeats the notion that they're just friends. It was obviously unexpected based on their interaction prior, but she acts like it's not a surprise. She acts like it's not a big deal. She acts like it's obvious, as if he's just imagining their relationship or something. And personally, I think that's pretty immature and ridiculous to not take Tom's feelings into into consideration here. Like for instance, in the scene where she gets mad at him punching the guy in the bar who kept hitting on her, sure. It didn't help anyone when you think about the logistics of him having punched a guy and presumably gotten bashed for it. But he's clearly not the type who regularly gets into fights. And here, again, I think is where Summer kind of sees what she wants and pretends things are how she wants them to be. It's a bit silly to pretend that this is a sign of his behavior normally. But she does apologize to him though, clearly indicating after their fight about being just friends that that wasn't true by kissing him. And at this point, we know and we see that she knows how he feels. So kissing him with the intention still of pulling back out the "we're just friends" card later comes off to me as just kind of fucking with him, to be honest. If you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody whom you know has strong feelings for you, but then you kiss them, what the fuck does that indicate? But then one of my favorite lines of the entire film is said, and it kind of changes the entire context for what comes later and pushes everything back into reality and back out of seeing things from solely Tom's point of view. As she says, she can't, and nobody can, promise that they won't feel differently in the morning. And I can see how somebody would view it as unfair, but she's basically saying that she can't promise that she's going to love him forever. I believe here that she is admitting that she does at that moment in time, but she's trying to not commit too hard by saying that I might change my mind tomorrow. But I kind of like this line a lot. I think that it very much suits the character. It very much suits how she views love and what she would do. And it's a fair point. People are allowed to change their minds, but it's here where we have to look at it from her point of view as well. Tom should make it clear that he wants more. He shouldn't say he's okay with just being friends if he's not. And really, he shouldn't be able to hold it against her if she doesn't, and she doesn't. And even if they are in a relationship still, she doesn't owe him anything. She is free to act however she wants. And we know that this comes from her belief system in love to begin with. She's independent, she just wants to have fun, as stated. He doesn't own her. I think that's a very big part of her characteristic. And this, I feel like, is where the label argument comes to play. And I think that the film both criticizes and highlights the importance and irrelevance of labeling things both at the same time. We're adults, we know how we feel, Tom says at one point. We don't need to put a label on it. But this is for Summer's benefit when he says this. And in my opinion, it's a little juvenile having to call it like it isn't. Summer is so hung up on not wanting to label their relationship, while Tom is equally as hung up on needing to have a label. It goes both ways. What's going on with us? Tom asks at one point. I don't know. Summer retorts. Who cares? I'm happy. Aren't you happy? And at that point, he is. Summer is a little in denial though when it comes to these labels. The thing is that I think she's scared of calling it like it is, a relationship. Because if she calls it that, it confirms that label. Then it makes it real. And because then she is going against what she believes in. And then she is open and vulnerable and culpable if things go sour, which in her experience, they always do. She doesn't want to be hurt, and in that way it actually works. She shields herself off from getting too hurt, from getting too committed. Whereas Tom throughout the film has thrown himself into the deep end, which results in heartbreak. Their intentions going in was everything when it came to the result. And in this way, it's clear that this unbalanced relationship with ill-fitting intentions was never going to work out. So when it comes to Tom and Summer, they're both good and both bad for each other. Tom unfairly expects too much. He expects the world of Summer. He expects her to make him happy. He expects a perfect little picturesque life like the ones depicted in all of his favorite albums, but life doesn't work that way. And then by being in this relationship that she never really wanted, Summer becomes completely numb by the end. And I feel for her. She feels stuck and confused. She doesn't know what she wants. And although the film is told from Tom's point of view, I also think that the film ultimately actually sides with Summer on the debate, in that because of her, Tom ends up bettering himself. It's very much using the trope of the manic pixie dream girl, but in a movie that knows it. It hangs the lantern on the trope and instead uses it as for character development. The reason I think it's more than just a trope is that we also get to see how Summer ends up happy, which she deserves, but it hurts Tom to see. Because from Tom's point of view, she said she didn't want a relationship. From the start, she didn't want to be somebody's girlfriend at all. And now, she's somebody's wife. Most impactfully, not his. Ironically, Summer wrecks Tom's vision of love. He blames greeting cards and pop songs, and now Summer, for his pain. His expectations screwed him over because he set things up in his head too much for it all to come crashing down. And for a time after their relationship, or whatever we technically call it, Tom becomes pessimistic about love. Destiny and soulmates are now childhood beliefs in his mind, whereas Summer now understands the concept of meant to be after rationalizing the odds. What if I went to the movies or somewhere else for lunch, or was there 10 minutes later? She thinks about the odds of meeting the man who has since become her husband when she did, and she does. She thinks it was meant to be. And because of this, by the end of the film, they end up on opposing sides on their viewpoints of love than where they started. And it was because of each other. And I think that's fascinating. I think it's very true to life. So in saying that, I think that they were both good and both bad for each other. They taught each other certain things, but, you know, Tom put too much pressure on the relationship, and Summer, she led him on really badly, if you ask me. But nobody is a villain in this movie. Nobody is the bad guy or whatever. This is just taking a look at how people work, how relationships work. 500 Days of Summer is an unconventional love story, as much as it likes to say it's not a love story at all. And I love that about this. The relationship ends. Not a lot of movies like this do that. And it makes their love story, or lack thereof, worth telling and worth watching. The truth is, the relationship was built on expectations and superficialities. Tom has romanticized the idea of Summer for the whole film, but at the end of his 500 days, he finally learns to let go. But there's still a bit of optimism left. We see that as he isn't completely shattered in life. He has been inspired by Summer, by his experiences, and goes on to better himself. He makes a career for himself in the field that he always had an interest in, and I don't think that he does that if not for Summer. We also see that he still wants to love and to be loved, as he meets a new girl with a contrasting name, ironically, to Summer, in Autumn, which, for as cringy as that might be, proves that he's ready to move on and to love again. But just maybe not so obsessively. At a first glance, the ending seems as if it's suggesting that Tom hasn't learned a thing, and that's how I used to feel. But looking at it now, I kind of argue that we can't know that until we witness his intentions going into a new relationship. Is his approach different? I like to think that it would be.